I didn't invite my parents or grandma to my wedding after years of them telling me I'd never find a man with my ugly face. I, 28F, stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my wedding veil with trembling hands. It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, but a nagging emptiness gnawed at me. The seats where my parents and grandmother should have been would remain empty, a stark reminder of years of emotional abuse that led to this moment. Growing up, I was never the pretty one. My face was a constant source of ridicule, not just from schoolyard bullies, but from the very people who should have loved me unconditionally. With a face like that, you'll never find a man, my mother would say, her voice dripping with disappointment. My father would nod in agreement, while my grandmother tisked and muttered about how I'd let myself go. Every family gathering became an exercise in humiliation. Aunts and uncles would whisper, cousins would snicker, and I'd retreat further into myself. My parents' solution was to push me towards plastic surgery, convinced that fixing my flaws was the only way I'd ever find happiness. But I refused. Deep down, a small voice told me I was worth more than my appearance. I threw myself into my studies, determined to build a life based on my intelligence and character rather than my looks. College was a turning point. Away from the constant criticism, I began to blossom. I made friends who valued me for my wit and kindness. I excelled in my classes, earning the respect of professors and peers alike. For the first time, I felt seen for who I truly was. It was during my final year that I met him. We bonded over shared interests in a campus club, our conversations flowing effortlessly. He saw past my insecurities, drawing out the confident woman I was becoming. When he asked me out, I was terrified. Years of conditioning had me convinced he'd realize his mistake and run. But he didn't. Instead, he showed me what real love looked like. He celebrated my achievements, supported my dreams, and made me feel beautiful inside and out. With each passing day, the cruel voices of my past grew fainter. When he proposed 2 years later, I was overjoyed. But as we began planning the wedding, old wounds reopened. How could I invite the very people who had spent years tearing down my self-esteem? The thought of them ruining this precious day with their judgmental stares and backhanded comments made me physically ill. After many tearful nights and long talks with my fiancé, I made the difficult decision. My parents and grandmother would not be invited to the wedding. The fallout was immediate and intense. My mother's shrill voice over the phone, accusing me of being an ungrateful daughter. My father's stern lectures about family obligation. My grandmother's guilt-tripping voicemails. Extended family members took sides, some berating me for my selfishness, others quietly expressing support. I stood firm in my decision, even as doubts crept in. Was I being too harsh? Should I give them one last chance? But then I'd remember the years of tears, the crushing self-doubt, the constant feeling of never being good enough. This was my day, and I deserved to be surrounded by nothing but love and support. As the wedding day approached, the drama intensified. My parents threatened to show up uninvited. Relatives pleaded with me to reconsider. Through it all, my fiancé was my rock, reminding me that I was worthy of happiness and respect. Which brings me back to this moment, standing before the mirror in my wedding gown. A knock at the door jolted me from my thoughts. It was my best friend, serving as my maid of honor. "You ready?" she asked, her eyes shining with pride and a hint of concern. I took a deep breath, smoothing down my dress. As I'll ever be. As we made our way to the ceremony, I braced myself for potential drama. Would my parents make good on their threats? Would I regret my decision? But as I stepped into the beautifully decorated garden, all those worries melted away. The seats were filled with friends who had become family, colleagues who respected me, and the few relatives who had chosen to support my decision. Their faces beamed with genuine joy and love. And there, at the end of the aisle, stood my soon-to-be husband, looking at me like I was the most beautiful woman in the world. In that moment, I knew I had made the right choice. The ceremony was everything I had dreamed of and more. We exchanged vows we had written ourselves, promising to build a life based on mutual respect, support, and unconditional love. As we sealed our union with a kiss, cheers erupted from our guests. I felt lighter than I had in years, unburdened by the weight of others' expectations. The reception was a whirlwind of laughter, dancing, and heartfelt toasts. My new in-laws welcomed me with open arms, showing me what a supportive family truly looks like. Friends shared stories of how we had touched their lives, reminding me of the person I had become despite my upbringing. As the night wore on, a bittersweet feeling crept in. I couldn't help but think of my parents and grandmother, wondering if they were sitting at home, angry and hurt. Part of me wished they could have been there to witness this joy, to see the beautiful life I had built for myself. But I knew that their presence would have cast a shadow over the day, bringing old insecurities to the surface. Later, as my husband and I swayed to our first dance, he sensed my conflicted emotions. "No regrets?" he whispered. I looked into his eyes, seeing all the love and acceptance I had craved for so long. "No regrets," I replied firmly. "This is exactly where I'm meant to be." In the weeks that followed, I received a mix of reactions from family members who hadn't attended. Some expressed regret for not standing up for me sooner. Others maintained that I had made a horrible mistake. My parents and grandmother remained silent, their absence speaking volumes. I won't pretend it was easy. There were moments of doubt, pangs of guilt, and a lingering sadness for the relationship I wished I could have had with my family. But with each passing day, I grew more confident in my decision. I had chosen to break the cycle of emotional abuse, to surround myself with people who lifted me up rather than tore me down. My husband and I threw ourselves into building our new life together. We traveled, pursued our careers, and created a home filled with love and positivity. As we discussed starting a family of our own, I vowed to be the kind of parent I had always longed for, one who would cherish and support their child unconditionally. A year after the wedding, I received a letter from my mother. Her words were a mix of anger and grudging respect. She wrote that seeing photos of the wedding had forced her to confront some hard truths about her behavior. While she stopped short of a full apology, it was the first time she had ever acknowledged that her actions might have been hurtful. I read the letter several times, emotions swirling. It wasn't the dramatic reconciliation part of me had secretly hoped for, but it was a tiny step in the right direction. I wrote back, setting clear boundaries but leaving the door open for future communication if she was willing to work on our relationship. My father and grandmother remained steadfast in their belief that I was in the wrong. I had to accept that some relationships might never be salvaged, and that was okay. I had learned that family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who choose to love and support you, flaws and all. As I approach my second wedding anniversary, I look back on that day with nothing but happiness. Yes, there were empty chairs where family should have been, but they were far outweighed by the seats filled with true friends and loved ones who saw my worth beyond my appearance. To anyone struggling with toxic family relationships, know that it's okay to prioritize your own well-being. Surround yourself with people who celebrate you for who you are. Build a life and a family, chosen or biological, based on mutual respect and unconditional love. Your worth isn't determined by your looks, your family's opinions, or anyone else's expectations. It comes from within, from the strength you find to stand up for yourself and create the life you deserve. And trust me, when you're surrounded by people who truly love you, you'll realize that you were beautiful all along.